The year was 1999. Believe by Cher was the number one song in the world, the New York Yankees were the most dominant team in American sports, and the world had finally witnessed a bad Star Wars film that was not a Christmas special. There was also widespread fear and panic that the inevitable doomsday was fast approaching. The good old Y2K. All the computers were going to shut down and the world would fall into an apocalypse. It was beautiful. But beneath all that chaos and hysteria, a man in Japan by the name of Kiyohiko Azuma thought of a question that sought to change the world as we knew it forever. What if we took 6 high school girls with disparaging personalities, put them in that high school setting, and proceed to let them run wild like a bunch of coked up fire ants in a mason jar? Well, the answer to that question would eventually manifest itself in the form of a series known as Azumanga Daioh. The title of the series, cleverly deriving from both the author's name and the format's name in conjunction with the publication it was serialized on. But that's basically Friday night trivia at the local bar levels of knowledge at this point. And 3 years later, it would be adapted as an anime series by JC Staff, which will be the topic of today's video essay. Anywho, the series has become something of an obsession of mine ever since I first began watching clips of it about 2 years ago as of this video. My Twitter feed would bless me with clips of the characters getting themselves into all sorts of totally wacky scenarios that would never fail in making me LMAO out loud. It didn't take long for me to latch onto these characters for their individual quirks that, when paired with the quirks of their peers, made for stellar comedic moments. There was just something so weirdly intricate about how the dynamics of these characters would play out across a wide variety of scenarios. To say the show is funny would be an understatement. That shit put me in splinters a lot of the time, and I am not a person who laughs or shows emotion very easily, as you can tell by my very stone face, my stone face that I have. I have a stone face. The show is also somewhat influential when it comes to the sort of shitpost, surreal, Gen Z type of humor that we see circulate in the internet these days. I mean, for fuck's sake, the show basically coined the term waifu, so if you're one of those degenerates who drools over moving pixels on a screen, then you owe this series many, many thanks. But enough about that. This is Snakes in Alaska, and I will now be talking about a cheery, cutesy, cute girls doing cute things anime while wearing a t-shirt of a death metal band. And for all the show's weirdness, there's a sort of ingenious level of craft behind most of the show's gags. And once you dig past the absurdity at the surface of its gags, you'll find the science lurking underneath. And what it mainly comes down to is a simple set of principles that the show masters with relative ease. Azumanga utilized a lot of these comedic principles, with the most primary one of them all being comedic timing. Azumanga utilized a lot of these comedic principles, with the most primary one of them all being comedic timing. After all, the show had to be adapted from a series of 4-panel comics, which is not an easy task as it would seem. Because with a more straightforward adaptation of something with this format, it would result in a boring but also jumbled and disjointed mess. So to compensate, the show's animators had to carefully recreate these comic strips by inserting long spaces of silence, pauses, among other timing techniques in order to properly adapt them to the small screen. And as a result of this, plenty of Azumanga's strongest comedic moments were punctuated by its slow but precise timing. And we've all seen examples of this in practice. They make up for some of the most excellent, memorable, iconic moments of the entire series, such as the scene where Chiyo gets pushed over by her teacher as she's wearing that huge fucking penguin costume. That scene was only able to be as funny as it was because the comedic timing is so strong. The excessively delayed framing of Chiyo's collapse allowed for a stronger sense of impact when she actually hit the floor. You were able to feel the sheer amount of weight there was to that huge fucking costume. Speaking of which, there are plenty of examples of Chiyo getting hurt, and this next example does indeed tie in to the comedic timing as well. It's another iconic scene, the one where she is struck in the noggin by a pop fly. Because the audience is already well aware of Chiyo's athletic ineptitude, You know the sequence could only have one outcome, and the punchline is that very outcome you were expecting. But what made it so funny was, I mean, do I even need to say it? No, instead I will explain it. It hangs on a single frame of Chiyo helplessly holding her baseball glove in the air as her friends watch in terror, waiting for the inevitable. It hangs on said frame for quite some time, long enough to the point where, just when you start to lose focus, it hits, both literally and figuratively, and it's got a nice little doink sound to go along with it, almost as if Chiyo's skull is filled with nothing but air. It's great. Also, notice how the two examples of gags I used so far involved Chiyo, a literal 10-year-old girl, getting hurt. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Watching that little shit get her comeuppance, it's great. Yeah, one of the major reoccurring jokes in the series is that she's always getting hurt in some way. She's always getting the short end of the stick in some way, and it's funny in some way every single time. Albeit, it's all done in an animated slapstick sort of way, so I can watch a 10-year-old girl get hurt and not have to feel bad about it. And trust me, there are so fucking many examples of Chiyo suffering just for being Chiyo. My personal favorite is when she's trying to hold up a mountain of books on Yukari's fucking hoarded ass desk because she can't clean shit because she's so lazy. Anyway, she's trying to hold up all those damn books, and she can't because she's a little shrimp. And eventually, all the books just collapse on top of her, and her teachers just watch it happen. Oh my god. Besides just being Chiyo, what did she do to deserve this? We will never know, I guess. Maybe God has the answers, I'm not sure. And on that note, this series has a wide variety of recurring jokes, and each of them are insanely memorable, thanks to them carrying a good amount of wit, pacing, and the way they're utilized within the scenes they're a part of. To elaborate on that last point, I found a few notable instances of the series introducing a gag in a particular sketch, then bringing it back several episodes later to repurpose it in a way that weirdly works, with Osaka's curiosity over Chiyo's pigtails being one of the most well-known gags, and the one fans would point out first. What gets me about this recurring gag is the way it progresses throughout the series. What begins as mere curiosity becomes a full-blown crippling obsession, to the point where she's having Lynchian dreams over them, a moment where the surreal humor the series is known for shines its brightest. Why is Osaka so obsessed with her pigtails? We do not know. Are the pigtails a figment of her imagination and only she can see them? Well, who the hell knows and who the hell cares, because it's funny and that's all that matters. I can list a few others that have stuck with me ever since my first viewing, like Sakaki's inability to get a cat to reciprocate her feelings for her, or Yukari's car being the root cause of a child's PTSD, or Osaka feeling the utmost satisfaction over splitting her chopsticks perfectly down the middle. I'll touch upon some of those in a bit, but for now, I would like to discuss the gag involving Tomo's use of the phrase nandianen, and why it remains one of my personal favorite examples of a recurring gag in the series. When Tomo repeatedly judo chops Yomi in the melon over and over again while repeating that phrase, 31 consecutive times to be exact, it not only offers some more funny antics between the two, it is also a clever callback to the very first episode when Osaka is introduced to the group. To further elaborate, everything Tomo knows regarding Osakans is the more stereotypical stuff. The Japanese equivalent of my upstate New York ass, thinking every southerner calls everyone partner and listens to Lynyrd Skynyrd's Freebird and literally nothing else. Anyway, Tomo anticipates a sort of rival dynamic between her and Osaka. Her rambunctious nature was finally bound to find some competition, but not just by anyone, but by an Osakan. Someone who is goofy and witty. I mean, she's just ready, man. She is ready to take on Osaka, ready for a comedic rival. She is locked the fuck in. And she will take any opportunity she can to get hit with the famous nandianen phrase whenever she says something stupid. But when Osaka turns out to be quite the opposite of the supposed typical Osakan, well, her dreams become unfulfilled. And with that, Tomo is left but with no choice but to reserve this dynamic for Yomi. which also works as a direct contrast to their usual dynamic. It's a sort of double entendre, and this series is ripe with them. Getting back to the whole Osaka loves chopsticks thing, it's also one of my favorite recurring gags, mainly because of the fact that it reinforces this idea that Osaka suffers from Asperger's. But I will touch upon that later. Anyway, over the course of the series, we learn that Osaka isn't exactly ripe with any major skills or even hobbies for that matter. But we do know one thing she's good at: splitting chopsticks. And she's so proud of her chopstick splitting skills that she goes to great lengths to show them off to her friends, complete with what I consider to be the greatest laugh in animation history.
Tomo-chan, huh?
But during the scene at the New Year's festival, towards the end of the series, the gang can be seen splitting chopsticks, much to Osaka's enjoyment. And then, it happens.
あれともちゃんはちゃんと割れてへんやん。あ、さっき持って割らんかったな。さっき持ったなって言うたやん。あかんやん。人の話を聞きなさい。ごめんなさい。なんで怒られてるの？
Gotta be honest, this is seriously one of my favorite moments in the entire series. For a character like Osaka to just fucking snap at Tomo just further reiterates the fact that Tomo is an annoying little shit who's just so coked up on caffeine and good vibes. And I love it. Yes, Tomo is such an uncontained clusterfuck of rowdy girl, rar XD, that even someone as functionless as Osaka just straight up cannot handle her shit. She fucking snaps. And she snaps over something so innocuous, even if it's so important to her. Like, okay, maybe it's not innocuous if Osaka loves it. If splitting chopsticks perfectly down the middle is what Osaka considers to be important and essential to our lives, then fuck it. It is important and essential to our lives. Anyway, with that out of the way, and with a few character dynamics out of the way, we can now move on to what I consider to be the ripest aspect of the show's comedy. Yes, as good as the comedic timing and recurring gags are, the real meat of Azumanga's humor are the character dynamics and how these contrasting traits interact with each other within a particular setting or context. Azumanga Daioh centers its characters around very basic sets of traits that, in isolation, may not amount to much, but in tandem with their surroundings, the real magic can occur. The most important step to creating a good dynamic is to have those basic character traits emphasized in a way that the situation demands. And Azumanga Daioh is able to accomplish this basically whenever two characters are on screen. There will be a time where two of the characters are interacting with each other within a particular context, where the humor is derived from the ways in which these personality traits are able to play off of one another. It becomes even better when you realize that swapping one character for another would radically alter the scene completely. That is, when you know, for a fact, that you have created a strong dynamic cast of characters. Take the scene during gym class between Osaka and Chiyo, for instance. You know, they're doing volleyball drills, but all they're doing is just smacking each other in the face with the ball. And the reason for this is simple. They're both not very athletic, to say the least. But the lack of athleticism stems from two completely different character traits, and I think that's pretty damn clever. Chiyo's childishness and larger focus on academics allowed her physicality to fall to the wayside. Meanwhile, Osaka is a total airhead and just has like no thoughts inside of her brain. So of course, she's not going to be very athletic either. And thus the end result, nothing gets done in their volleyball drills except for bruises and ball prints on their face. Anyway, as I said earlier, if you were to swap out either Osaka or Chiyo for literally anybody else, then the joke would be entirely different. Swap Osaka for Tomo and Chiyo is getting sent to an early grave. Swap Chiyo for Yomi and she'd likely be pretty peeved the whole time. But swap Osaka for Yomi and she'd likely be a lot more caring and forgiving. The list goes on. Again, you just know that you have a good comedically inclined set of characters when they all share this aspect of compatibility with each other. It's almost beautiful how interchangeable they are within each and every scenario they're a part of. It is the basis of good, character-driven comedy, and Azumanga Daioh absolutely nails this aspect. But the funniest part is that I'm not even finished discussing this topic, because believe it or not, there are a few characters I haven't even mentioned in this video yet. Characters that also share unforgettable dynamics amongst others. But before I get into any of that, I believe it's important to stress another fundamental aspect that makes these characters as likable as they are: their juxtaposing traits. Azumanga's cast isn't exactly the most complex out there, but the characters do possess a good amount of juxtaposition within their traits. Some examples include Chiyo's cutesy innocence being juxtaposed by her susceptibility to utter torment, Kagura's physicality being juxtaposed by her lighthearted goofiness, or Osaka's lack of common sense being juxtaposed by her knowledge of the incredibly mundane, like snails and riddles. And then there's Sakaki, my personal favorite example of this trait juxtaposition. Sakaki is viewed by her peers as this cool, super duper badass, with her strong athletic skill, on top of standing at an absolutely towering 5'8". All the girls fawn over her, with Kaorin in particular having lesbian fantasies about her that are about as subtle as an M. Night Shyamalan plot twist. But underneath his exterior lies an introverted girl who is obsessed over things that are cute and tiny. It's a nice little contrast that plays with the viewer's expectations a bit, resulting in fantastic comedic and character moments. When she's able to finally find a cat that actually lets her pet them, it's super tender and wholesome and all that good shit. This scene where she's alone with Maya is as funny as it is adorable. She's finally able to shed her usual, calm demeanor, and just have all sorts of fun with her pet feral cat. She spent such a long time trying to get a cat to love her back, but now that she was able to accomplish this, she doesn't have to hold in all of her joy anymore. She can just let it all out by rolling around on the floor with Maya cradled safely in her arms. But the moment Chiyo shows up, back to calm and collected cool girl. Overall, I say Sakaki is probably my personal favorite character in the entire series, but that mostly stems from the fact that I find her to be deeply relatable, which I will touch upon in a bit in another topic. Is my hair okay? She's got her own individual quirks and shit like that, but not unlike the rest of the cast, she too has great character dynamics, especially with my girl Kagura. I'll get to the dynamic between her and Kagura in a bit, but for now, I would like to address this scene that I particularly love, and it's a scene between Sakaki and Chiyo, where the latter is quite literally begging the former to give her her height back. Imagine it. You put the tallest and shortest characters together, where the tall character in question has an infatuation with the small stuff, thus establishing a great dynamic and a memorable gag to boot. Okay, seriously, take a shot every time I use the word dynamic. You'll be drunk off your ass within, like, seconds. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any of that shit. So, I'm unfortunately not gonna join you in on the fun, so yeah. Anyway, I hope you didn't put your Smirnoff or whatever it is away. Again, I don't drink, so I don't know any fucking brands that aren't the basic shit. Anyway, whatever you're drinking, I hope you didn't put it away yet, because I am not done with this character dynamics topic. Anyway, the dynamic between Sakaki and Kagura is also an incredibly compelling one. It's a nice subversion of your typical athletic rivalry trope, where Sakaki is demonstrably superior athletic skills, but is mostly disinterested in the whole rivalry shtick. But Kagura never leaves discouraged. Matter of fact, she's so into this rivalry that she'll shoo away Sakaki's precious little kitties under the guise of protecting her. And that leads to moments like this. Kagura herself is also a generally great and, dare I say, underrated character. I kinda like to think of her as Tomo, but more so down to a science. She's energetic and is no stranger to goofy antics, but in each of these scenarios, her head is usually in the right place, and in certain moments such as this brilliant exchange with a foreigner, her goofiness comes from a place of complete sincerity. On that note, this part is astoundingly memorable. The way she screams "yay" has been ingrained in my head for well over a year at this point. Kagura is very helpful and headstrong, but deep down inside, she's a bit of a goof, but with a surprising amount of emotional depth. Which leads me to finally cover the next aspect of this series. I've discussed the show's comedic aspects for, 20 minutes at this point? But right now we're going to shift gears a bit and discuss the show's themes. Because yes, while this is primarily a comedy series, a very great comedy series as I've demonstrated throughout the past 20 minutes, it is also a slice of life series and a coming of age series, one that teaches you all the glorious little themes of adolescence and growing up and maturing and shit like that. And of course, all these themes are presented in a particularly poignant manner that feels uber nostalgic and uber comfortable. It doesn't quite tackle these themes in any nuanced or sophisticated manner, but hey, that's okay. Because again, Azumanga's portrayal of these messages is some of the most poignant I've ever seen, to the point where even I can resonate with them, despite having never watched this series until long after I'd already graduated. Now, let's take a moment to play a quick game of perspective. Put your feet in the shoes of the people who were going through this series for the first time as it was initially airing and being serialized. You were going through high school at the same rate as these characters were. You were meeting friends and developing your relationships with said friends at the same rate as they were. You were doing all these festivals and all these school trips at the same rate as they were. And when it was all said and done, you graduated at the exact same time they did. Man. Even the most masculine of men is going to feel some type of way when they think about that. Jesus, that tugs at the strings of the heart and of the soul. Anyway, one of the core values found within the series is the journey of high school life and how it translates into adulthood. I think it's sensible to sort of split this series into two halves, the first half being a straight up absurdist comedy, with the second half taking a more somber and mature tone, while still maintaining those comedic elements, of course. And I think it's sensible to do so because the rate at which these characters grow and mature feels so natural that it only makes sense for the entire tone of the series to follow suit. Again, we'll see events such as culture festivals and various holidays repeated throughout. Only the second time around, the episode shares a heavier focus on the sheer friendship of the cast and how much it had developed over the course of the previous use of that particular setting. I think one important lesson we should all learn at this stage in life is that the transition into adulthood shouldn't come at the expense of your personality and just who you are as a person. You should mature a bit, duh, but adulthood simply just means that you have actual responsibilities now. You don't have to reshape your entire image to fit some arbitrary societal standards. And this philosophy would be best reflected in this series through Yukari and Niyamo's dynamic. Because when you watch their antics on screen, one thing becomes immediately apparent. And I'm not talking about their status as a lesbian relationship, no. I'm referring to the parallels that are drawn between this dynamic with Tomo and Yomi's. They both operate under the whole manzai comedy trope, where Tomo and Yukari are the rowdy, unhinged type, whereas Yomi and Niamo are the voices of reason, so to speak. And this next point may come across as me talking out of my ass, but I'm going to say it anyway because I feel like it, motherfucker. I feel like these parallels were created intentionally to highlight the sort of philosophy I mentioned earlier, where retaining your core personalities are an essential part of growing up. Matter of fact, I also like to view Yukari and Niamo's relationship as a bit of a glimpse into how Tomo and Yomi would behave towards each other in the future. And if I haven't made it obvious enough already, these two character dynamics share numerous similarities despite the age and profession difference between them. It's almost as if, again, these parallels were created intentionally to highlight this theme, that becoming an adult does not mean you have to abandon your lifestyle, your personality, your traits, no matter how childlike or stupid or immature they may seem. You are still the same person. You're just a different age. You just have more responsibilities now. And The parallels between these two dynamics highlight this philosophy wonderfully. At least, that's just my uber personal take on it. And as much as Azumanga Daioh is about the nurturing into adulthood as well as the innocence of adolescence, it is also about the power of friendship. And I don't mean power of friendship in the stupid shonen type of way, where a character's getting his ass beat by the villain, and then he gains some arbitrary, superficial power because his friends was cheering him on or something, and he remembers, my friends are my power. It works in something like, I don't know, Kingdom Hearts or Yu Yu Hakusho, but I can't think of many other examples, because it's just a dumb fucking trope and I'm tired of seeing it. And Azumanga's portrayal of the power of friendship, so to speak, is of a more literal case, where building connections is one of the building blocks of maturity. The memories you create through high school and life in general are not created through what you're doing, but rather who you're doing it with. And Azumanga Daioh presents this beautifully, through a number of wholesome character interactions that grow sweeter as the series progresses. I especially love this moment towards the end of the series where Tomo, yes, Tomo of all people, was the first to give Chiyo an ovation when she graduated. If that's not the sign of a good friend, then I don't know what the hell is. Hell, that whole graduation episode in general is the fucking shit. Yes, I know it has the iconic Osaka sneezing scene. Yes, I know it has the iconic I wish I were a bird scene. But fuck all that shit. The tenderness and wholesomeness are the real reasons why this episode is so good, and why it stands out amongst a pack of already memorable episodes. It tugs at the heartstrings the whole way through, and by the time the final moment where the girls bow to the audience, you can just forget about maintaining any semblance of masculinity, because the floodgates will surely open. And these ideals of friendship extend beyond the main group of 6, as the teachers, Yukari and Naimo, are also very much amongst this circle of buddy-buddies. And this is shown fantastically in what I personally consider to be a top 5 moment in the franchise.
Oh, Kagura, どうした?先生。なんだ?忘れ物か?ねえ先生、机とか椅子とかもらっちゃったらやっぱまずい?そりゃまずいだろう。なんか記念に持って帰ろうと思ったんだけどな。ん?
大丈夫。もうあなたは持ち帰ってるのよ。そう、みんなとの思い出を。
God damn, man. That is heavy. That is some heavy shit, man. You think Berserk is sad? You haven't seen shit yet. Like, Berserk? That's nothing. There's no emotion. This is where the real emotion is, baby. And this gets me thinking, because I'm gonna go off track for a minute, off topic for a minute. I don't know if teachers tend to be better towards their students, or they're just better people overall over in Japan, so much so that they warrant such a reaction when they graduate, when the students graduate. Because I did not like most of my teachers when I was in high school. I mean, I had a couple, there were some exceptions, yes, most notably my English 12 teacher, who was a big fan of Kendrick Lamar. I will always remember that about him. I mean, he played DNA in the middle. DNA was a song he played the most, but he played a lot of Kendrick Lamar when we were like doing our projects and shit like that. It was great. Like, have you ever had a teacher that was that cool, where we'd play Kendrick Lamar to his students as they were working? I don't think so. And it makes me wonder what he'd think about this whole Drake debacle. If I were still in high school in 2024, I would have heard Not Like Us at least 600 fucking times by this point. Anyway, I wonder how he's doing now. I wonder how all my teachers are doing now. If you were one of those teachers I liked, well, you know who you are. And if you were one of those teachers that I didn't like, you probably don't even remember I exist. Anyway, Azumanga Daioh's ending is just fucking great. Its themes are fucking great. Its humor is frickin' great. Its characters are guckin' great. Even the minor characters like Chihiro or Kaorin or other teachers in the school. Yukari and Naimo are awesome. I would totally hang out with them. But there's also— oh my god, is that? Anyway, I feel like there's a character I've missed. A character I have not mentioned once in this entire video. I feel like I missed someone, but that can't be right. I've got everybody. I know I've mentioned everybody at this point. I've mentioned six of the six girls. I mentioned some of their other friends, some of their more minor friends. I mentioned the teachers. I mentioned Chio's father, of course. Um, yeah, I think that's everybody. Oh, silly me. I forgot to mention Chio's dog, Tadakichi-san. Oh. Oh, yeah, that's right. Kimura. Yeah, to put it lightly, Kimura is not that great of a character. To put it harshly, he's pretty much the sole reason why I cannot give the show a perfect 10 out of 10. He is also the reason why I'm reluctant in recommending this show to others. This guy is a total ass. John Herbert, Suguru Kamoshida, and Hisoka would take one look at this man and start quivering. I don't find this character to be entertaining or funny, he just kinda sucks. I mean, yeah, he usually gets his comeuppance for his behavior. Usually, not what involves poor innocent little Kaorin though. Nah, some of that shit felt way too real and I find it to be rather off-putting. The main problem I have with this character going beyond the surface is that, I mean, well, that's just it. There's just a surface. This character has no comedic depth to him, unlike the rest of the cast. Even the minor characters have more comedic depth than he does. He basically just has, like, one joke to his entire character. Like, whenever he's on screen, you basically have to roll your eyes because you know exactly what's going to come of it. He's just going to gesture at the girls in some sexual way, whether it's over their gym clothes or their swim outfits or just anything in general. If it were like more of a satire of the predatory behavior of some teachers, that would have been different, but I kind of don't get that implication with him. So, yeah, enough about Kimura. Let's just move on before I fall asleep, because this character is just so boring to talk about. Anyway, the reason I bring this up in what was an otherwise exclusively positive review is because it's important to highlight the shortcomings of the things that you love. I have this sort of mindset where you can't fully appreciate a piece of entertainment until you're able to recognize its flaws and come to terms with them. You can accept that even your favorite things are not perfect. That's a-okay. And in the case of Azumanga Daioh, there are some things about the show that I'm not too crazy about. Aside from Kimura, obviously. For starters, I'm not the biggest fan of the show's art style. This is more of an uber-personal gripe of mine, as opposed to a legitimate critique. But I just long for the alternate reality where JC's staff adopted the art style of the Very Short movie. I just love the way everyone looks and moves in the Very Short movie. The very fluid and expressive body language, the way everyone's eyes have that little sparkle to them, the way everyone just looks so huggable, I love it. And the comparatively simplistic art style of the anime just isn't up to snuff for me. Not that I hate it, I think it does what it's supposed to just fine. I just vastly prefer the art style of the Very Short movie. And I know people are gonna hate me for this, but I just cannot get behind the whole Bankura thing, or knuckleheads as it's roughly translated to in English. I mean, sure, in a vacuum, the scenes involving them are cute and whimsical, but they also hinge upon Osaka and Kagura acting rather out of character. I know they aren't the most academically inclined characters, but this trio dynamic winds up flanderizing that aspect of the character to the point where it becomes jarring. Like, they become an entirely different character, a sort of Tomo clone, if you will. And while I can totally understand why this dynamic became so popular, I just don't jive with it personally. These antics don't make much sense for Kagura, and especially Osaka, to be doing. Well, that's my big hot take for the series. I hope you don't hate me for it. Another big hot take I have with the series is that Kaorin kinda sucks. No, I mean, it doesn't straight up suck. I mean, she's fine. She's kind of adorable, but she's a good example of wasted potential, I think. They try to assimilate her into the main group later on in the series, and it just doesn't work out. Her inclusion feels kind of forced, almost as if the writers just felt as if she wasn't getting enough screen time and they desperately needed to do something with her. And once they actually put her into the group, she still doesn't really do much of anything. Like, the moments that I remember for her aren't with like the group or anything. It's the lesbian shit. That's basically her only personality trait. I mean, it is funny. I think the total disregard for subtlety and like the fucking rainbow over her head and the church bells and shit, that's funny. The lack of subtlety there is just straight up fucking funny. But some more personality traits would have gone a long way. Anyway, those are my biggest gripes finally out of the way. I have a few minor nitpicks like certain gags going on for way too long, but I'll leave my grievances there so I can begin discussing another topic, with this topic in particular being a rather interesting one, because we are now dealing with something that extends far past the show itself, more specifically, how a certain portion of the fandom relates to some of its characters. I have browsed numerous forums on this topic, went through several Twitter threads, went through several YouTube and Reddit comment sections, talked to some of my friends who suffer from what I'm about to talk about, and did some personal introspection of my own. And after all of that, I was able to come to the conclusion that at least 3 of the characters within Azumanga Daioh are neurodivergent in some capacity. Okay, that was just me being semi-dramatic for entertainment's sake. But the fact of the matter is that these 3 currently unnamed characters all share personality traits that many people suffering from ADHD, ADD, etc., like myself, find to be relatable. Osaka and Sakaki are often viewed as autistic by several members of the community, and this is for a wide variety of reasons. Let me make one thing clear though. For me personally, Osaka is not the one I relate to. I mean, we share some of those little quirks, like the tendency to space the fuck out. But in a general sense, the character I more so relate to is Sakaki, because she's quiet and timid and bashful, and never really talks to anybody, never goes out of her way to interact with other people, and when people go out of their way to interact with her, she kind of stammers, doesn't really come up with many words to say, again, even when directly spoken to. And of course, she's obsessed with cats, and she gets antsy when things aren't lined up properly. Yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell. Again, I do share some similarities with Osaka, some of her traits, but in terms of who's gonna wear the "You're literally snakes in Alaska" pin, that honor goes to Sakaki 110%. And about Osaka, she's pretty obviously the go-to example of alleged autistic representation in this series. I think it's important to not conflate characteristics of spaciness and such with the disorder, because that can make you sound like a tone-deaf asshole. But the similarities between some of her character traits with the most common symptoms of the condition are rather difficult to be taken as a face value coincidence. Again, I do not think Azuma truly and honestly had this intention with Osaka or Sakaki, but the parallels most certainly exist, and people find her character to be relatable for a reason. It goes back to what I said earlier, when I mentioned her knack for solving riddles and having an extensive knowledge of incredibly niche topics. There's also the utmost fascination with the mundane, like the chopsticks and the melon bread and the gleeful act of shoving her face into flour. Again, I'll reiterate that despite being on the spectrum myself, I relate more so to Sakaki's bashfulness and inability to interact with others in public, as opposed to Osaka's blissfully childlike behavior. But all in all, I think it's very nice that people such as myself, or people slightly different than me who suffer from different conditions than me, are able to find something that they can enjoy and relate to in some of these characters. I think that's a very wholesome and sexy thing, and also kind of a depressing thing when you consider that actual representation of these conditions are mundane, feel uninterested in exploring the nuances of the conditions, or they're just straight up fucking offensive. Like that doctor show that was trending like 2 years ago. Yeah, the more I looked into that situation, the more egregious that it got, really. Like, finding out that the guy supports Autism Speaks and apparently didn't consult anyone autistic or had anyone with any knowledge in the writing room, in the writing department. Yeah, it was pretty bad, man. In terms of between these cutesy little anime girls and an actual representation of that condition, I think I've made it pretty damn clear which one I'm more geared towards and how authentic they feel, despite it not even really being an actual true representation, more of an accidental one. But again, I digress. My point stands. I'm just gonna move on before I completely trail the fuck off. Getting back to what I've said numerous times about the show being comforting, you don't have to look very deep into the series to find something that will make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, because Azumanga Daioh is one of the most comforting series I have ever endured. There's just this constant air of warmth and goodness that I simply cannot get enough of. Azumanga Daioh isn't exactly concerned with the real trials and tribulations of your average high schooler. No, instead it focuses on the day-to-day stuff, the mundane stuff, the walks after school, shenanigans at the cafeteria, going over upcoming tests and school projects, that sort of thing. And while this all may seem tedious on paper, the way Azumanga Daioh executes this format leaves behind a trail of nostalgic comfortability in its wake. We have plenty of media covering the more dramatic bits of high school, like troubled relationships with boyfriend, girlfriends, parents, all three. And while all that's fine, of course, I can also appreciate a show like Azumanga Daioh for presenting the more basic aspects of your high school days in a more lighthearted manner. Again, it comes across as nostalgic and comforting. I can go back and watch the series and almost immediately I feel like I'm right back in high school again. It doesn't beat you over the head with some cheap, sugar-coated bullcrap either. It just runs through the same basic scenarios of the day-to-day high school life, just like how most people remember them. It presents these concepts in a way that'll have you calmly reminiscing over the days you pranked a classmate into eating something spicy, the time you went on a vacation and got to experience some nice local delicacies, the times you spent pondering over what you were going to do once you actually graduated. But let's be real here, even on a strict moment-to-moment basis, Azumanga Daioh is still incredibly comforting and fuzzy and warm and good and wholesome and cute and basically the anime equivalent of this picture of the dolphin that's all glitzy and glamoury and all that shit. It's very lovable. Barring any of these scenes involving chaotic, surreal humor, the series has a ton of sweet, down-to-earth moments amongst its cast. As fun as the trippy moments were, the moments where our characters are discussing somewhat basic topics come across as endearing and I enjoy watching them. This exchange involving Chiyo and Kagura in episode 19 in particular really drives this point home, and I think that's the biggest reason why the whole tent scene works so well. Through their more adult-oriented conversation in said episode, Chiyo was able to learn a thing or two about adulthood, so her being the most mature person in that tent scene works so well thematically. I just love how natural the inclusion of the more tender moments felt. They feel well-deserved and come across as a result of the characters' dynamics further developing beyond the realms of mere comedy. I also like how every comedic slice-of-life series seems to have those particular moments or particular episodes that are really sad, really emotional, really depressing, etc. There's the friendship waiver scene in Nichijou. There's that dastardly episode in Lucky Star, you know exactly which one I'm talking about. And of course, Kaguya-sama gets pretty damn dark towards the end of Season 2, when pretty much everything, like a few episodes ago, they were talking about fucking underwear and stuff. Yeah, that's how a lot of comedic anime works. from what I've noticed. It's just a little trend I've noticed, and I like that trend. Side note, the music plays a significant role in why the show feels as comforting as it does as well. I mean, I've been using tracks from its OST throughout much of this video, so you yourself can likely see what I mean. Many of the show's background tracks just scream typical high school day. Like you sit around at your homeroom desk, looking out the window as the morning sun rises as you sit. All the while, your obnoxious albeit likable friend keeps bothering you about God knows what. These are the perfect background tracks for such a scenario. It works to embody the feeling of your average day in school. It's so whimsical while simultaneously feeling calm and laid back. Again, it suits the show's setting and themes like a damn glove. And it's just a very charming series altogether. If the comedy doesn't hook you, if the characters don't hook you, then certainly the atmosphere will hook you. And if you aren't hooked by that point, well, needless to say, we cannot be friends, and I wish the absolute worst for you. Nah, just kidding, but still, fuck you, bro.